Well, welcome. Namaste to everybody. Shalom. Peace to you. I hope that you guys are being blessed and experiencing all that the universe has intended. Sometimes that intention brings struggles, and those struggles are intentional. Uh, Quite amazing that we get the opportunity to choose, and you're going to see tonight that many of the things I've been sharing for quite a while that might sound foreign to a lot of people, especially people who kind of have lived their whole life in Christianity, are really not foreign at all. They're only foreign to those people who have been deceived, blind, ignorant, a whole lot of words, most of which aren't our fault to begin with, because even if you picked your parents, you didn't pick what they were going to program you to. And so it's amazing that we're blessed that we live in this time, even with all the chaos and all the things, and then all the things that, are working that may very well manifest themselves in the very near future. That doesn't in any way change source one iota. It doesn't change the goodness. It doesn't change the fact that we have an opportunity to do some great and mighty things if we choose to. Of course, as is always the case, it is a choice. And so we're going to jump into the Corpus Hermeticum. We left off in page 13 last week, and I'm going to jump back just a few verses to the beginning of a thought process and then move into that. So if you have it on your phone, if you pay attention and you want to be part of it, then you can download the Corpus Hermeticum in a PDF. Very simple to do, and we would be on page 13, and we're going to take off, and if you would, the section 6 on page 13. So listen to what this says. Understanding that Hermes Trismegistus is talking to a son, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this was his son. Oftentimes in the past, not so much now because, well, many reasons, but in the past, people would go to a seeker, people who were seeking truth, they would go to a seer, a teacher, and they would basically, if you would, donate their life to him. And we see that's the whole concept of all the disciples in Yeshua. They left what they were doing and they went to learn truth. And that worked and is why we have even made it this far, I really believe, because otherwise I think we would have probably self-destructed a long time ago, although we're not that far from self-destruction now. And so he says, this is otat, the gnosis of the mind. For those of you who may not have heard or understand, gnosis could be categorized as divine knowledge. Okay, gnosis is not just you read a book and you know something. Gnosis is divine knowledge. It is knowledge of the supernatural, knowledge of the things. It is the things that come through in direct gnosis is when Source gives an insight directly into you. And so this is otat, the gnosis of the mind, visions of things divine. God knowledge is it, for the cup of God's, for the cup is God's. And so then Tat says, Father, I too would be baptized. Now, if you remember last week, we were talking about a baptism, but it's not the kind of what we were told and lied to about what baptism is. That is a concoction. It never was the true thing. That's why they gave you a material thing you can do to usurp a spiritual thing. And that's always the way that they will be. That's what he's talking about when he talks about the flesh, or the natural versus the spiritual. It's always that concept. And when people, most assuredly the archons, desire to divert you, they give you a physical thing, something that you can relate to, and you follow that as truth, and yet it's actually leading you away from truth for the most part. And so he says, Father, what dost thou mean? I'm sorry, I did jump. He says, Father, I too would be baptized. And then Hermes says, unless thou first shalt hate thy body, son, thou canst not love thyself. Stop and ponder that for a bit, and there'll be somebody's mind who will get all screwed up in this. What is he saying? Well, we don't have a right concept, or most people, I've been teaching this for a long time, but we have a concept of hate is more of a concept of a vehement anger against someone. And that's a carnal manifestation of the meaning of that. The proper understanding of hate, when you see hate, especially in a scriptural, spiritual context, hate may have the same connotation, but it's not as we view it as being so much appointed at someone as typically it's something. So I hate alcohol. That means I don't want alcohol around me. And so the concept of hate has more of pushing away from you, putting away from you. And in truth, when if people understood what they were saying, that is exactly what they're saying, but there's some human connotations that get thrown into that, and then all of a sudden it turns into this horrible thing that we call hate. In reality, there is a positive in hate, because you should hate those things that are not right, or more appropriately, you should put away from yourself those things that aren't right. And if you don't hate them, then Hermes is about to tell us the reality of that. So for all the things that people think they know what positive and negative is, the mass majority of people have no concept about that principle, what true positivity, because many things that are positive look very negative, and things that are negative look very positive. And so that's because we lived in a really corrupt society. And so he says, unless thou first hate the body, thy body, son, thou canst not love thyself. So when Yeshua said that you are to love your neighbor like you love yourself, if you hate yourself, you will also hate your neighbor. That is to say, if you push away from yourself, if you push away from looking at you, maybe you do hate yourself. Maybe you look at yourself and see how much of a failure you've been your whole life. And if you're doing that to yourself, you can be dang sure guaranteed you're doing it to everybody else as well. And so that concept really is quite damning on one level, and unfortunately it is hurting other people, but it's not damning them like it is you. And so he says, unless you hate your body, your physical self, which is supposed to be made, according to Yeshua, into what the inside is, very important point, unless thou first shalt hate thy body, son, thou canst not love thyself. That's why we see such narcissism. That's why they are so lost, because to them, they are perfect. There is nothing wrong with them. It is okay to hurt people and yada, 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 yada. And so he says, but if thou love thyself, you shall have mine. And so if you reverse the thought he just started with, loving yourself comes out of hating yourself. And that's all directly correlated with the mind. And having mind, thou shalt share in the divine knowledge. So there's really a lot of concepts, whether it be here, whether it be in the Sumerian text. Guys, what's coming out of the Sumerian text is so crazy. I keep telling people that I talk to, just hold on a bit, because they're already totally destroying everything that has been reality for thousands of years. We are only like 1/10 of 1% of the tablets that are available. I think the number is around 700,000 texts that they have now found, and we just don't have enough people to interpret all of those. But what is going to come out of this is, just like I shared with y'all the other day, about the truth of the matter is the whole thing on the mountain with the God of fire and the bright and the blinding face and the commands, if you would, they're called testimony actually, which has a totally different concept than a command, but they are still binding laws for humanity that function on the earth. And so I tried to say that when I left Christianity, just because you think that what you believe laws of humanity are, just because you now think that you're not obligated to them. How did I know that? I just knew it. And now it's proving itself out that is, in fact, gnosis. It is truth. There are divine laws that will affect human beings if they defy them. Whatever thing a man sows, that is what a man reaps. And I assure you, when we finally see some more of them come forth and we get even more clearer pictures and corroborating evidence, it's going to actually surprise you that the consciousness that everybody in the New Age movement are telling you is how big a lie that actually is, and that consciousness has always been a mental thing. For some of you guys, that may not be what exactly you wanted to hear, and that's okay with me. If I don't tell you what you want to hear, I would desire to tell you the truth, though. And I've been telling you for a long time that consciousness has side effects of you possessing it. And it isn't remaining like you've always been. So everyone will have to choose for themselves whether they believe that or not. But anyways, he says, unless you first shall hate your body, son, you cannot love yourself. But if you love yourself, thou shalt have mind. That's a really amazing statement, to be quite honest with you. So it's almost as if you don't love yourself, you also don't have gnosis and you don't have mind. Because the higher self would always tell you to choose loving yourself. And if you choose other than that, then you're not functioning according to the higher self. They're really not separate. They're very intricately interwoven, your mind and higher self. And so he says, it is not possible, my son, to give thyself both. How foreign is that to you can't serve God and mammon? What Yeshua was telling the world is that you can't have it both ways. You either are conscious or you're not. You can't be unconsciously conscious. And you can't be consciously unconscious. So, and I mean to things that perish or to things that are divine. You can't worship the earth and all of the human possessions and money and all of that. It cannot be your priority, and you care about the divine things. You have a God and it's not divine, or you have a God that is divine and the other things are not relevant to you. That doesn't mean you don't have to live and function in the world. It means that they're not your highest priority. And so, foreseeing that existing things are twain, body and bodiless, in which the perishing and the divine are understood. The man who hath the will to choose is left the choice of one or the other. For it can never be the twain should meet. So it really kind of amplifies, if you want to know. Of course, at this point, I believe that these documents originally existed before there was even a Yeshua, just as with the Sumerian stuff existed before there was Egypt, Akkadian, Babylonian, Semite, Jew. Those are all young things compared to Sumerian. And so everything came out of Sumer, but why? Because it came from the gods that created us. And so it is not possible, my son, to give yourself to both. You cannot serve God and mammon, folks. If money is your priority, you'll diss somebody spiritually in the blink of an eye. And it goes on all the time. It just is what it is. Wow. You cannot give yourself to both. I mean, to things that perish, or fleshly, or earthly, or carnal things, and to divine things. Foreseeing that existing things are twain, body and bodiless, in which the perishing and the divine are understood, the man who hath the will to choose is left the choice of one or the other. And so at that level, you can kind of recognize that there are people, you live around them, you probably know them, you probably have them in your family that will not make a decision. And whether you know it or not, they're no better off than those that make the wrong decision. They may believe they are because now they have become neutral, but neutral indicates that you have no belief system. Because people that have belief systems always function according to what they believe. Whether you believe that you don't have to, that's what you do. If you believe that you have to, that's what you do. There is no fake. That's why I tell you constantly, just simply watch people's behaviors and you will find out their spiritual state. And it really doesn't take very long to do so. And so, I think I jumped. Yes, I did. I apologize, folks. My phone moved a little bit and it messed me up. It is not I got it. It is not possible to give thyself to both. I mean, to things that perish and to the things that are divine. Foreseeing that existing things are two, body and bodiless, in which the perishing and the divine both are understood, the man who hath the will to choose is left the choice of one or the other. For it can never be the two should meet. And in those souls to whom the choice is left, the waning of the one causes the other's growth to show itself. So if your growth of your physical body, mental, carnal self, if that growth is what is manifesting, it tells whoever has consciousness that you are unconscious. On the other side, if consciousness is the one that is growing and ruling your life, it will also tell the conscious, but it also typically works out by telling the unconscious. Why? Because your behavior is contrary to their belief system. We see that going on all over. The people in our country that are totally sold into this thing, that you can simply make a declaration no matter what is between your leg, and you get to decide what sex you are. Those people are totally sold into that fact that it is a reality. And as many of you who've talked to them know, there's not really much need in wasting your time. They're manifesting what is inside of them. They can't reason real and fake. It's sad, but it is reality. And so, did I do it again? Gosh dang it. I did. So, he says, it is not possible to do this. I love the firmness of that. We think that we can create all kinds of possibilities, right? You were told and brainwashed in Christian church, with God all things are possible. Well, for God, I might say for God all things are possible, but you ain't God, not in that manner. So not everything is possible to you, no matter how bad you convince yourself that it is. And so, the man who had the will to choose is left the choice of one or the other. For it can never be the twain should meet. And in those souls to whom the choice is left, the waning of the one causes the other's growth to show itself. Now, the choosing of the better not only proves a lot most fair for him, and this is a little bit archaic English, so if I hesitate at something, I'm trying to get in my mind so that I have a clear picture of this archaic English that was used here. Now, the choosing of the better not only proves a lot most fair for him, or in other words, proves good for you. For him who makes the choice, seeing it, makes the man a god, but also shows his piety to God. Whereas the choosing of the worse, although it doth destroy the man, it doth only disturb God's harmony to this extent, that as processions pass by in the middle of the way, without being able to do anything but take the road from others, so do such men move in procession through the world, led by their bodies of pleasure. And so for everyone who thinks that God's sitting upstairs and crying about all of the people who don't choose him, in reality, you're like crosstown traffic. He's trying so hard to get through to you, but you don't want it. And he comes to a place where he just allows you to get what you want. It's really more of an inconvenience to stop the flow of what Source actually intends to happen in humanity. Who is the end loser in that? Of course you are. Source isn't going to lose. And so, I don't know about you guys, man, but we have been pushed and led and brainwashed in this earth to such a point that we really do believe this nonsense that there is no price to pay for our behavior. And unfortunately, even if you are lucky enough to make it through this life without having to pay that price, there is still a price to pay. And I know you've been brainwashed into, you can say you're sorry and go to heaven, but folks, I'm sorry, there is no heaven and no one's going there. There is an ancient place that tells us the pattern of what happens to humans afterwards. And it has nothing to do with the heaven. In fact, everything is exactly the opposite of what they told you in Christianity. That is ancient by thousands of years, 3,000 to 4,000 years from Christianity. And so, we can't give ourselves to both. We have to make a choice. So now the choosing of the better not only proves a lot most fair for him who makes the choice, seeing it makes the man a god, but also shows his piety to God. Whereas the choosing of the worse, although it doth destroy the man, it doth only disturb God's harmony to this extent. So it's like when you drive home, well, some of you live in places where you might get a little more angry than God does, but where we live, the procession is about 3 or 4 cars in front of you that you wish would hurry up. For others, it's hundreds and thousands of cars. But it's really just like that. It's just like a traffic jam. That's why I used that phrase from Jimi Hendrix's song, you're just like crosstown traffic. And so, that's how it disturbs him. But take the road from the others, but in the middle of the way, without being able to do anything but take the road from others, which is what they're doing, so do such men move in procession through the world, led by their bodies' pleasures. There really is a really huge piece. I noticed when I've talked to a lot of young people, we have a higher number of women from 50 years old and down who have never married and I hear stuff all the time. Well, I want to have kids. Well, honey, sorry, you're about like 20 years past being able to have kids. You should have thought about that 20 years ago when you were running around fulfilling your lust. But that's not honored in our society. Is virtue and purity and all of those things are no longer honored. And unfortunately, ladies, I think that all of you know that you have a limited amount of time that you're capable of creating a child. And when that time is gone, that time is gone. And so we have a society. There is a reason why Elon Musk, and he is right when he has concerns that humanity, actually shorter time than you think, will cease to exist because of the quantity of children that are being born across the whole earth. Well, what does society tell you? Don't have kids. Mothers, don't have 12 children that you raise up and teach honorable things and you show them. Don't do that. That's bad. That's negative. You should only have 1 or 2 kids, and that should suffice it. And if you only have 1 or 2, that's wonderful. But on the other side, what if the higher standard really was having children and loving them and raising them to be good, honorable people? I guess each person has to judge that for themselves. And so, this being so, O Tat, what comes from God hath been and will be ours. But that which is dependent on ourselves, let this press onward and have no delay, for it is not from God. Do you see how binding these things are? And if you can learn to live in the freedom of truth and relation with Source, how wonderful and blessing it is. But on the other side, in the society especially, maybe worse now than any, but there was some pretty bad societies before us. But everything is about pleasure and fun and money and on and on and on and on. There's very little virtue in our society anymore. And so, yeah, you can live like that if that's how you choose to. And so, thus being so, O Tat, what comes from God hath been and will be ours. Those people who have made the decision. But that which is dependent on ourselves, let this press onward and have no delay, for 'tis not God, 'tis we who are the cause of evil things, preferring them to good. And that works from the micro all the way to the macro, friends. That works in your life. If that is where you're at, that will manifest. But it also manifests at the macro level, both in countries, but also in the earth. The evil that is here because of man. You say, well, I'm not an evil person. That may very well be, but you're also not the only person. There happens to be 8 billion people on this little thing that we call the planet Earth now, folks. That's a little bit more than a few. Why was it better when people lived back in the past days? Did they have hardships? Yes, they did. Did they go through them? Well, they did, or they died. But the reality is most bad people had more virtue than good people have now. And so, thou seest, son, how many are the bodies through which we have to pass? How many are the choirs of daemons? How vast the system of the star courses through which our path doth lie, to hasten to the one and only God, who is monad, who is also called Source. Thou seest, son, how many are the bodies through which we have to pass? How many are the choirs of the daemons? On Saturday, in what I was sharing with you, it gave a statement, well, 2 of them, and they were both kind of, I think, equally worth pondering. One is that even if you don't have all the truth, having some of the truth is a good thing. And I believe that is true. Because I don't know that any of us will ever possess all of the truth. So wherever you are, you have to stay open and be willing. That's why we have transmutated, I'm going to use that term, Those people that have been with me and where we were 30 years ago and where we are now are in totally different places. It won't be any different in the years that are coming. We will find things that we have locked in adamantly, and they're gonna read another tablet, and they're gonna decipher another tablet, and it's gonna show you that was a lie. It's gonna be constant from now until the Anunnaki come back through the door, which they will. And so, we've passed through many bodies, many choirs of daemons. There are many beings. We learned that way back in the Nag Hammadi text in the secret book of John, that when creation began, there were aeons that created complete societies. Well, I have to be honest with you, I've kind of put those things together, and I believe that the Anunnaki are nothing but an aeon that has manifested in our realm. But it's also starting to become very clear through archaeology that the aeons are not as ancient, even though they are ancient to us, they're not as ancient on this earth. In fact, there are starting to be pieces of archaeological things that are popping up that put the numbers back at 200,000 and 300,000 years ago. There were other people that were ruling this earth. They are finding all kinds of things that have been buried, and all of a sudden, it really should shock you in light of all that is that even if you don't know it, as someone else may, the things that are coming out and the things that are being said and the revealing that the archons are doing, even through the channelers and the spiritists and all of those things that are warning and prepping the world that there's somebody coming, and yet we can go sit down and in 25 minutes we can learn who's coming through that door, and they were coming through that door 5,000 years ago. It was planned that they were coming through that door, and yet we go, well, I can't believe that because that sounds like science fiction. 5,000 years before you lived does not make it wrong because you are ignorant that it exists. What it does is it simply means you're ignorant. That's all. So, if you understand the concept of ignorance, ignorance means without knowledge, not you're stupid or something. I want to clarify that because somebody will get offended. Not that I'm opposed to people getting offended. Most of the time it really doesn't matter to me much. But in reality, I never have an intention to offend someone. I more have a reality to stand up for the truth that is being shamed, if I might use that word. And so, this being so, Tat, what comes from God hath been and will be ours. I love that. Why would I want to worry about following my flesh when I just had a revelation given to me that if I am one of those who makes the right, what is God's is mine? That to me, that's like, not that I don't struggle with my flesh just like every other person does, but inevitably my spirit wins 99% of those battles. I want what he wants. I want what he promised. And so, thou seest, son, how many are the bodies through which we have to pass, how many are the choirs of daemons, how vast the system of the star courses through which our path does lie, to hasten to the one and the only God. For to the good there is no other shore. There is no other option than monad. To the good. It hath no bounds. It is without an end, and for itself it is without beginning. It always has been. 2, though unto us it seems to have one. The gnosis. Therefore, to it, gnosis is no beginning. Rather, it is that gnosis doth afford to us the first beginning of being known. So why did Yeshua come and teach Gnosis? Because it was the beginning of us being known. It was also the beginning of us knowing. Because us being known is tied directly to us knowing. That's why the Sumerians told us that we must have a remembering. And now we have people today that are selling the same message, that we must have a beginning. We have to remember what we used to be. And the message is correct. Maybe sometimes it gets convoluted what it is that we're supposed to be remembering. And I've heard lots of variations of that, most of which are not correct, I do not believe. So, for each and every one of us, folks, heaven and earth, as we know them, are going to pass away. Mankind, as we know it, is going to pass away. And the question for each of us is exactly what Hermes is talking about. You get to choose which of those that you desire. You get to choose whether you're good. You get to choose whether you're blessed. You get to choose whether you're... But on the other side, if you don't make those right choices, then whether you like it or think that you have or not, you still made a choice. Rush talked about that. If you choose not to decide, you've still made a choice. And so for each and every one of you, it's very, very, very important, folks. It's not surprising, just so you know, wars are actually orchestrated by the spirit realm. There's much, much knowledge and wisdom outside of Christianity about the reality of that. This war that is going on with Iran, that has just reignited again, is for a purpose. It's going to end exactly when its time to end comes. When its fate will bring the end to it. And up until then, we have to decide in every step that we take who we are going to be. Just as world leaders have to decide who they are going to be. And many make the wrong because they're flesh and they're not interested in what God has. Whether they're Christians or aren't is irrelevant. Because Christianity never was the standard. Right was the standard. And so when we begin to see that those things are not mutually the same, it doesn't mean that Christian people don't have any right in them. It just simply means that their right is corrupt because of what they've been taught. And so you have to change your teaching and your righteousness, hopefully, then adjust to the truth. And so peace to each and every one of you. Mariana, that's 14 for next week. We are really blessed, and I know that it may seem kind of strange that the world, because many people I talk to everywhere, whether it's in a Walmart or somewhere else, are struggling with the reality that things just don't seem right. You know what, folks? They're not right. This is not the time of my grandpa. It ain't ever going to be. We're never going to go backwards. We're only going to move forward. And we have many things that are against us, and we need to be conscious of that. But what we really need to be more conscious of is that we have many things for us. And not everybody will. Many don't care. Many don't believe. Those are all things that have always existed. Just because they don't doesn't change the truth. And so I hope you guys will take care of yourself. I hope you will recognize that the changes, both positive and negative, that are happening. I have to be honest with you, half of the world is condemning higher consciousness, even though they're the ones who are telling you about your frequency and your vibe, because they don't even know what higher consciousness is. I wish sometimes people would just pick up a Daniel Webster and read the thing. It would be mind-boggling, the reality of knowing what consciousness even is if you're supposed to be it. I mean, it takes what, 2-3 seconds? As somebody I know likes to say, only takes 5 seconds. And you know what? The truth of that statement is that's the truth. It does only take 5 seconds. And so, peace and happiness and joy. The world is wonderful. Everything is beautiful in its own way. We are blessed if we choose to be. and I hope you make the right choice. Peace and shalom to each and every one of you. I hope you guys experience all the blessings that are coming, and they're going to be hid in the middle of all the chaos that is coming. Shalom and namaste.